Hello, everyone. I'm James from Mode and Synth. Mode is a L2 focused on building an intersection of DeFi and AI. And yeah, I've been in the space 7 years, which feels like too long, but hey, yeah.
Hi, my name is Amrit. I handle operations at AltLayer. We started off as a RaaS service, so we help people deploy rollups. But over the last, I guess, 6-8 months or so, we have been exploring what we can do on the AI side of things. So, which essentially boils down for us is verifiability. So, how do you make sure that if you have an agent that you're using, it is indeed the agent that you're expecting to use, and how do you get that proof? How do you get that verifiability?
Hey, I'm Ron. I'm co-founder at Theoriq. So my background, I've been working in AI for a long time. Ran engineering and research at an ad tech firm, Quantcast, that got to about $500 million in revenue. Then went on to start enterprise AI company, sold it to Teradata, where I became GM of AI. Then I went to the Google Cloud CTO office, where I was responsible for applied AI. Then went to Vector Institute, nonprofit, large research institute, growing a research and engineering team. And then started Theoriq with co-founders who'd worked with me at some of those previous places because we believed that AI was going to be the most important technology of our lives. It was incredibly important that we not allow a few billionaires to control it for all of us. So we've been building in that intersection for 3 years, been laser focused on AI agents for the last 2. Where we really are building a swarm protocol that's laser focused on the agentic economy, right? So I think we saw in our testnet last fall about 500,000 people engage with a variety of agents, but DeFi and real utility was a theme that stood out to us. And as a lot of people in crypto Twitter getting excited about Twitter bots that had spicy takes but no real utility, we were convinced that building the rails for agents to have the right guardrails, the right capital controls, the right kind of scalable messaging to empower meaningful use cases. We've been building in public, showing how a swarm of agents can come together to do liquidity provisioning and market making. And likewise, we think yield management's another major opportunity. We think that's going to be transformative. We believe that DeFi is winning and taking over. And we believe that agents are going to be the dominant form of DeFi in the near future.
Hi, everyone. My name's Harrison. I'm the Director of Business Development at Space ID. We're a universal domain name platform and aggregator. So we build out decentralized identity infrastructure for different L1s and L2s. Now with the improvement and increase in AI agents as well as on-chain assets, we're really focusing on the verifiability there, building trust, building an easy way to track everything on-chain through human-readable wallet addresses.
Awesome. So I made it. What's up, everyone? I'm Francesco. I'm leading developer relations at Consensus MetaMask. And I'm excited to actually speak about AI agents. It's quite a long time. I'm experimenting. I'm happy to host this panel. How many developers do we have in the room? So I'm just fine-tuning those are my questions a little bit. Okay, sounds good. I mean, DeFi, AI, obviously like agent coming from Web 2. How you guys see kind of things moving forward? How was kind of I would say 1 year ago versus today in terms of tooling, easiness to build, even how to consume agents today around DeFi? Let you guys speak first.
I can go for it. So I think Ron described the hype cycle pretty well, how we had initially these Twitter agents that were just talking about random stuff, and how that's now evolved to us seeing or the market wanting more utility-driven agents. So I guess we have this period right now where we're seeing a lot of smart automation, but not necessarily a huge amount of autonomy. So this is what I think the next 12 months are going to focus on is are these agents actually using AI and making these decisions based on things that aren't just simple automations. So yeah, we're focusing a lot on building that. And yeah, I think this is going to be the biggest change. And with regards to DeFi, yeah, the key things really are about risk management. Right now, there's still any agent still needs to have guardrails. You can build an agent fairly easily, but yeah, the question is how do you verify it's doing what it should be doing? What guardrails does it have so it doesn't make any bad decisions? These are all things that yeah, we're learning and we're still at the early stages of.
I think there are three kinds of, or broadly three kinds of agents that you see in the space. One that I call a personalized agent, so agents that somehow you customize for yourself. You could imagine, I don't know, an agent that tells you what kind of regime you should follow to weight loss or whatever, right? Or it could be like, here's my strategy. I'm very risk averse. Here's my stable coin. Give me around 3% yield and figure out the best way to do it. So it's very personalized agent. And then you have agents which are not personalized, but they fit in a certain service. So imagine something like, let's say, Aave or Gauntlet or MetaMask, where the agent is not customized for you particularly, but it's customized for the service that you're intending to use. And the third kind of agent that I would categorize as an agent which is very generic. It's not customized for anything. It's just something that's available. For example, ChatGPT kind of agent that it's a multifunction agent. I think what we have seen so far is mostly second kind of things, or between two and third, which is like things like AI XBT, things like which kind of give you some specific service, but still very general purpose in that sense. And I think what's missing, or what I guess some people are trying to do, is the second one truly, which is imagine a world where you have MetaMask giving you direct access through an agentic through an agent that allows you to translate whatever action you want to take through MetaMask. You could imagine Aave, Gauntlet that have the service integrated in the service itself that would basically simplify the onboarding and usage. So I would say this is where I'm hoping that things will evolve because I'm personally not sure if personalized agents where you actually personalize things for you, we need that right now. We need a little bit more distribution, and that will come from those services that are already there. They already have consumers, and you kind of integrate AI agents in that service.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the original question, I think the really important things that have moved, a lot of times people get really focused on, how do you get started, and the proliferation and the maturity of frameworks like ELIZA or ARC, or good examples of it's easier to get started, but we're still seeing is that agent builders quickly discover that they need to take more control of the end-to-end process of how they build. But there's some big advances, right? Like the firepower that's now available for building good agents just is improving on a monthly basis, right? The base models are getting so much better. Right, so like the really good metric around autonomy. Metter is an independent research lab that measures the capabilities of models and agents, and they're saying that every 7 months, the length of task that agents can perform is doubling. I haven't seen anyone do really good tests in DeFi, but it matches our experience, right? So the level of autonomy, the kind of things that agents can do in DeFi, maybe it's something that takes a person 2-3 minutes right now. But we should be planning that by the end of next year, that's going to have doubled 4 times, right? So it'll be an hour. And there's a lot of things you can do in an hour a person can do. Notably, what that doesn't include is do deep research on a token, which is more than an hour job to do well, right? So I think a lot of people are barking up the wrong tree trying to do trading agents where it's quite difficult to get that deep insight. It's great to have a really unique take that an AI XBT, et cetera, might have, but where we think is going to be a ton of utility is indeed in personalizing, because it's got to be adjusted to your strategy. It's got to be relevant for what you're doing. But really that full automation of agents that are playing an inner loop and constantly monitoring the market and sentiment and trends and readjusting based on your goals, right? We think there's going to be faster movement in B2B, which is why we think market making, liquidity provisioning, yield management, those are big opportunities. That's what we're focusing on, more so than retail traders. But I think the other thing that's really, amazing for builders in this space that's accelerating progress is we're getting standards, right? So Anthropic came up with Model Context Protocol, which is a standard for how you can give data and tools. And we're seeing lots of people apply this to build great plugins so your DeFi protocol can now be called by an agent and used, or get access to valuable data. So I think that's accelerating progress too. And that's why there's huge unlocks, right? The capabilities to build great agents in DeFi have really arrived just in the last few months. And by the end of the year, they're going to be stunningly good.
Yeah, I agree with the general sentiment of the panel. I think most agents right now are really just meme coins with Twitter chatbots attached to them, but that's quickly changing. People that want to develop financial structures, people that want to develop research structures, they have these ideas, but they may not know how to translate that into the technical needs that they have. So they'll be able to soon use natural language to code and deploy these bots. And that's really where we're going to start seeing the proliferation of AI agents, in my opinion. So like you said, market making, liquidity provision, research, so many different financial angles where it may be easy to build out the models now, but it's not easy to translate that technically unless you have a lot of technical experience. So I think that's really where we're going to start seeing these types of agents come on chain and really make a difference outside of just, chatting on Twitter and highlighting the sentiment and really develop much deeper insights and much deeper capabilities that are available now. It just takes a lot more time to build out something of that caliber.
If I may add one point to this, I think, again, right now when you see these agents, they're kind of standalone agents. They do certain tasks and you're happy with the task. And of course, people talk about, we should be able to build these composable agents, and on-chain composable agents. So you have an agent that does something, it produces output, that output gets consumed by some other agent to perform some other task. And if you do this truly, this composability, one of the main things that composability requires is verifiability. Right? And this is kind of why all these DeFi protocols on Ethereum or DeFi apps on Ethereum are actually composed, because you trust what's coming out of this protocol because of the underlying consensus protocol. And so there is a need for, if you want these apps or these agents to work together, the other agent should be able to verify what the other agent did. So I think there has to be more push, and I think there will be more push as some of these agents get used in a much more wider setting. These agents will have to collaborate, and then you have to have trust, and that trust would come from verifiability.
I think that's too simplistic. Like, we definitely, our protocol around swarms is of course about agents collaborating. The reason why I think it's simplistic is what you can verify tends to be very simple, whereas like the specification of what an agent's going to do is incredibly complicated, right? So, you can absolutely do, like James was talking about, have guardrails, right? So you can have smart contracts and say, hey, like, there's limits, right? Like, we know that this vault the agent controls should not be sending money to a random address. No, that's not allowed. Whatever you manage to, if you manage to jailbreak the agent and get it to send money to your wallet, no, that should be stopped by the vault. Okay, that's great, right? But how do you know that the agent's making wise decisions? You can't specify that, right? Like that's most of what you worry about. It's not like, was it, okay, yes, you don't want a malicious agent that's been programmed to steal from you, but more often you're concerned about, well, the agent developer just didn't do a very good job and the agent sucks and it's not managing my money well, right? But how do you verify that? Well, what we think you have to do is have independent evaluators that look at track record and hold people accountable. So that's not what I think a lot of people mean by verifiability, which is sort of a narrow thing of like, I have a cryptographic proof that this thing is right. And that often boils down to, I have an open source code base and I can prove that I ran the code. But guess what? You can run DeepSeek and verify you ran it correctly and it still hallucinates. So that's not sufficient.
I would argue that hallucination is not about verifiability. It's more of a model property, right? Which is like, if the model is wrong, let's say there's a model that always gives 1. You could say that the model is wrong, but you could still verify the model is actually doing even if it's wrong, it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. You can verify incorrect behavior, but that's not what the user wanted.
You
can verify what they don't want.
No. So verifiability is not about that. Verifiability is what systems, when you talk about ZK rollups, the verifiability is not about what user want. Verifiability is about what the system is supposed to do. And you're verifying what the system is supposed to do, not what user wants. User could want anything, and that cannot be modeled what you want to verify.
So I think we agree, but I think what the user wants more is reputation and to know that an agent works well, and you probably need to have intersubjective criteria to say, was this a reasonable decision? To say like, was this, if this is a bug or an error, maybe you should be slashed, right? I think that's what has to be worked out is, what does it mean? Like, if somebody is managing money, if it's a human, it's not like that they follow the law. It's like, were they a good asset manager, right? It's the same thing for AI agents. The bare minimum is verifying that they computed things correctly.
I mean,
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big problem right now, especially with what people call vibe coding. You know, they're building out these models, but they're not able to verify that they're actually going to be able to do the outputs that they need. So I think you guys are kind of talking about two separate aspects of verifiability. First, the agent or the protocol itself, and then the outputs of the agent and what it's able to do. And both of those, I think, are going to be important and essential in different ways. I mean, if you build something out and theoretically it works, but then it doesn't perform as needed, you know, what's really the point at the end of the day?
It's like if the agent doesn't do the right thing but makes you loads of money, you're probably happy. If the agent does the right thing but loses money, you're sad. So that's why, yeah, you got to kind of understand the strategy and the risk, I guess, and everything in the beginning.
Yeah, and for that you need to have. I mean, at the end of the day, we're doing like we're building consumable agents, right? That user actually can attest, like, okay, these have a track record or not. If the agent is not performing, I mean, important is that the non-performance is actually tracked. But before even speak about coordination between agents, we need to build public attestation and social reputation for agents. Not performing is not a bad thing. It just need to be attested, so users are allowed to actually do like create their own kind of decision path. Like DeFi Summer, like all the fork dexes, how many people got dragged because they didn't know that actually like the right kind of like dex to actually swap was I don't know, a Uniswap and on like a matcha swap coming like through. Same with agents. I see like maybe 400 forks of AXBT, but users are still using the best distributed forks, because obviously like making decision today is hard because there is no social reputation attestation or not even registry that are based on open source code. A lot of agents are still block boxed, especially on DeFi. Right now, there are only probably like two main agents vertical. There is the social vertical and the DeFi vertical. Although most of the people, even on the DeFi vertical, they're not deployed on production yet. They're all testing still. So yeah.
There's a couple in production, like Giza have agents in production.
Yeah, I interviewed the founder, right?
Yeah.
But also Giza on production, track record is still kind of like not there on production. TVL is super low.
Yeah, like 1 million, I think. Yeah.
What is it?
1 million? Yeah, 1 million, which isn't huge. Yeah.
No, but I mean, the things are evolving, right? I think tooling is getting there. People understand the framework are not, are also like somehow locked in for builders, and they're kind of like going from frameworks to integrations too. So I think that there is a lot of things evolving. That's kind of the question, is like, I think it's improved like crazy, but in the same time, we kind of like agree from the panel sentiment, right? Verticalized agent is something more interesting than actually generalized agents. And also the other things that you mentioned, the framework and standardization. I think this is very important, especially about social coordination, agent-to-agent coordination. What do you guys think about agent-to-agent coordination? Is it too early? Because who is building standards for agents?
Yeah, well, like we are, right? So our Swarm protocol is very much about agents dynamically being able to work together, right? And we're working with a number of the projects that have agents in production. You know, I think the reason why is that there's just too much to do for any one builder to build it all, right? So being great at, you know, like your example of the Giza Arma, right? Being great at optimizing yield in an ecosystem is a really good task, but that's not all you need, right? Or, you know, we're working with Cookie, and they've got really good signal agents that detect out of social interactions for other AI agents what's going on, and that's really powerful to feed in, right? So like making those pieces work together dynamically, I think is how we win as an ecosystem, right? It's the same kind of composability in smart contracts. You know, I think the idea that you have to build an agent that's vertically integrated that does everything is a tall order, right? And so I think we're already seeing a lot of excitement around agents coming together dynamically in swarms, and you know, totally agree that reputation is an important part. Over time, what you like today, I think you still have a fair bit of curation. So while the protocol makes it easier to communicate, we're not seeing things to like fully autonomously form. You know, we've got prototypes of how that works, but the market's not there yet. People still want to sort of say, hey, I'm going to curate these things to work together, but it's still dramatically easier if they didn't have to be built together from the jump and like tightly composed, and only these 7 agents work together. That's what's happening in Web 2, is you're having multi-agent compositions, but it's, you know, one builder that's building all the agents and manually decomposing the tasks. And that just can't scale as quickly as all the innovation of independently developed agents.
That also adds the problem that is mentioning. It also means that there are different kind of little islands that are being created, right? Here are my 5 agents that work together, and here are the other 5 agents that work together, and so on. Which means that and making them, work in a heterogeneous model is going to be very, very difficult. Which also means that there has to be some sort of an open framework that people could use. Which again, people are still, there's no clear way or path right now. But the idea that there has to be one way to discover other agents if they exist. For example, today, if you want to find a service, you go and Google. Again, maybe Google is not doing the best job. They may have bias or whatever, but at least you have some way of discovering what other agents or what other services exist that have, give you travel advices and whatnot. And right now, if you have to find those agents, you have to go to one specific provider that has these agent lists, and then you go there, and then you go to the second one, and then go there and find. So there's no universal somehow way of discovering some of these agents that fall in a certain specific category. And you have all these siloed things, and all of them kind of work together.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think before agents to agents, there needs to be like a few successful like single strategy agents. Because I think like the reality of like why we don't have like a big success apart from like AIXBT, which is like successful from research and then speculation on its own token, is because like DeFi strategies, building them is like really, really hard. And building like a bulletproof DeFi strategy is really, really tough that actually makes money at scale, right? It's like, so I think the yield optimizers are interesting because they're essentially like automating moving like your assets across different protocols. So it's like, we're still at this like point of like, you need smart automation. So maybe you're running an LP strategy and your agent just like automates that. But I think until we have like an agent that's consistently outperforming like a normal vault, doing something normal, like normal automation, we're not gonna see like agent to agent kind of interactions emerge, right? So I think that's where we need to like find new data layers, really leverage like autonomy to make better decisions, to like go past what like just a human like portfolio manager can do, before we see agents cooperating together.
See, I think the upside is more true disruption, that the ability of most users to manage this stuff manually is quite challenging. But you get into like, what are the real requirements, taking in a lot of context and making good decisions. And this is where agents and LLMs excel. Like, you just don't write down a narrow set of rules, right? It's like maybe, and to the point, why do you need personalization here too? Because like a lot of it is going to be a dialogue of like, well, what's your risk tolerance? And is this something you're comfortable with? And like, how do you make these trade-offs, right? So I think that's where you're going to see democratization, right? Like the person who's already using the DeFi tools and the native dApps and they're a power user, they're not going to get that much out of agents in the near term, but that's a tiny fraction of the potential market of people that would like to benefit from DeFi.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on the siloed part. It makes totally sense also what you're saying specifically. I mean, it's also a good question, right? Because I think like smart automation need to start also with kind of like low level, very easy automation, right? Even like funds rebalancing, like very kind of things that are not from the user perspective, from the user experience perspective, they're not even touching the end users. There are services provided to actually like DeFi protocols specifically to optimize their services for users, right? So there is also like this angle.
Yeah, there's also like, you think like, who are the competitors for agents? It's like, well, it's just like vault strategies, right? Like I could put my money into a vault and it's essentially like the same thing, right? I deposit it. Hopefully after a few weeks, months, years, I withdraw and I've got more. Like it's the same thing, it's the same user experience for an agent. But I think the difference—
But that's a one size fits all.
Absolutely. But that's the thing for the agent. It's like, yeah, hopefully we can go, like agents can evolve to have like this more personalization, this curation. You can have this dialogue, as you said, discussion. You can say, I hold X token, I want to hedge it by doing Y, and it can then automate that strategy. And you're still just depositing your funds to the agent will run the strategy, and then you withdraw them and hopefully you've made money.
And
yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it doesn't even necessarily need to massively outperform what's currently available yet. It just needs to bring the cost down drastically so that it makes sense for people to utilize these agents instead of whatever market maker or firm they're currently using, essentially automating that away. It's not going to I think that's where it's going to start. It's going to grow from there. But first, it's like you guys said, there needs to be successful use cases of these base agents that can do something very stringently, but well. Even if that's something that's currently being done already by outside firms, once that provability is there, then I think it will continue to grow. So once we do see those first couple successful use cases, whether it's vault management or arbitrage or market making, then it'll kind of have that proof of concept where people will then continue to build and abstract further.
Yeah, I mean, the question is also like, how we kind of like go in the right direction on a full kind of like decentralized kind of agent that is permissionless, right? Because if we're actually like building products for like protocol specific developers, we will end up actually like having again a black box extra service that will be kind of like sold to the end users, right? Because like the most of builders that I was speaking about, Gizas was one, for example, like frameworks are moving forward. They're also like pushing a lot of kind of integration. So there is also flexibility in building. But in the same time, Web2, the major Web2 AI builders that I was speaking about, they're all kind of Python based and they are building from scratch. So even the frameworks, so one question that I want to ask in general is that from the builder perspective, do you see kind of like tooling going in the right direction? What do you wish like kind of like the gaps that we need to kind of like, I don't know, like feel to actually welcome. I'm not really interested on the Web3 developer side. I think the biggest brain capital that came in this cycle is obviously not meme coin, it's actually like Web2 PhD building AI agents right now. Even if there is no kind of like big on production agents right now, I think like we should kind of like enable better developer experience on that. So what do you think are kind of low hanging fruits on filling this developer gap?
I think that, so we've built like some infrastructure stuff. Like we use Go SDK. We built like an AI terminal that you can interact with and do stuff on chain, very basic. We built this like data layer called Synth, which is on BitTensor. And we have like some PhD guys doing that. And that's like much more complex. We find that there's a big gap of people who like really understand like trading and building trading agents and the software you need to use to do that like effectively. It's pretty hard, it's pretty complex. It's mostly focused on understanding risk. So I think like we do have kind of what we need right now at the infrastructure level. We just need more like domain expertise for like building these like specific strategies that are gonna win.
So one point that I would like to make is if you look at ELIZA and the SDK that comes with it, one thing that I didn't like about this is that you have to build a new plugin for every chain integration, which just seems stupid in my view. Like it's kind of like if you're having MetaMask, then it's like, okay, downloading 5 different MetaMask for each RPC endpoint that I want to add. So I think it gives an impression that there's a lot of activity happening, but in the end, if you distill them down, it's just one EVM chain integration. That's mostly it. So I feel like some of those things are unnecessarily complicated and doesn't have to be that complicated. Again, I'm talking in the Web3 perspective, but you could extend that in other contexts as well. But like that's one thing that popped up to me, which is like completely unnecessary. Like what's the point of building one or declaring it as a plugin for every single EVM chain that I want to support in the SDK?
Yeah, I mean, I think the frameworks are all making rapid progress. Like ELIZA v2 is a big improvement over v1. But what's hard in DeFi is testing your strategies, and especially so when you get into a world where agents are not just looking at a narrow range of historical data, but by definition trying to take in a broad range of social and other information news. Because how do you backtest that? How do you develop confidence? How do you then get to the next level of, even if it backtests, game theory and testing how the market's going to respond, right? So that's what's hard in DeFi. What's hard in developing AI agents? It's evals. It's figuring out how to specify the behavior you want, right? So you put it together, and the thing that's hard about building AI agents in DeFi is how do you test them? How do you know they're gonna work?
Drop the mic, boom. No, I agree. Yeah. I mean, siloed is also like one big part of the game, right? Because building siloed ecosystem, I see that with a lot of like MetaMask snaps. And basically, like the reason also why kind of MetaMask snap exists is that, okay, let's enable permissionless innovation instead actually like building like copycats, kind of like wallets doing the same features. Because this is not innovation, this is not progressing. How it's progressing is kind of like lowering down your inference level more on the OS level, providing permissionless innovation to developer and builder so that I can actually like build integration no matter what. They have flexibility and they're coming from different backgrounds. And also the other things that you touch is distribution. How we kind of like increase distribution. Like obviously we need to kind of like test and have some track record, but it means also distribution to protocols, not distribution to end users. How we increase distribution? That's a question.
I think if we can find agents that make sustainable returns, we'll find users.
Yeah, if the incentivization is aligned, then the users will follow. And I think that's one of the massive benefits in crypto is that it's very easy to align these incentives, for the end users, for the developers, and for the agents.
I got a comment because the last talk was railing about incentives. And I think, what you have to have is you have to have a good product and then incentives, and giving people early reason to adopt becomes an accelerant, but it has to be a good product. Now, I think agents in DeFi are a great product because they solve for the usability challenges that most people find in DeFi. And let's face it, if you've ever found yourself sitting there Googling, like, how do I move this effing asset, this old wrapped USDC that's sitting on Polygon that I'm not using, and I wanted to move it over to Base, it's like, it shouldn't be this hard, right? I mean, I'm pretty smart and I work in this space, and it's like, that was a waste of my effing time, right? So it can be too hard. And then you get to, and wouldn't it be nice if there was something that was like working on this all the time for me? So agents are a huge unlock for DeFi. So I think it's a great product. You don't just need incentives. Whereas, when all you have is like Me Too products, like one more, chain that has no reason for being, and they incentivize users to dump TVL. Well, no wonder it's all incentives because there's no value there.
Yeah, incentives for incentive's sake. Once they dry up, it's done. So yeah, there needs to be something underlying the value for sure.
Talking about going back to distribution, I think distribution comes in usually in two ways. One is like you work hard to get users, therefore you build your own distribution, right? And that's a long struggle that you have to go for. And then second is you partner with people who already have distribution, enjoy some distribution of some kind. So for example, coming back to things like MetaMask, like they have distribution. And the idea is like, if somehow you build something that has been validated from your, let's say, 1,000 users or 100 users, that gives the incentive, not incentive like financial system, but that gives the motivation for something like MetaMask, for something like Gauntlet, or for something like Wi-Fi to be able to integrate something like this, or maybe build their own, right? And so one way is, as I said, you have to go and find your own users and build your own distribution yourself, or you find a partner that has a distribution. Hopefully you can get that distribution through that channel.
Yeah, like just put our agents on MetaMask.
Yeah, but it's a good point, right? Because we're looking into it, but the question is also like, we're going back to standards. Everybody has different building kind of like strategy. We see different kind of like, it's not just framework based. A lot of people are starting with ELISA for like their kind of, like MVP, and then they're moving because of flexibility, kind of like, because they're obviously hiring a lot of like Web2 devs to kind of like from scratch rebuilding things. So it's also coming back to like standardization. And who has this responsibility to build these standards? Because it needs to be an unbiased kind of organization.
Yeah, pretty much every team we've worked with or spoken to about ELISA seems to rebuild it. And I think it's the same in Web2. Like everyone who has a set framework seems to just end up rebuilding it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very hard to get something totally unbiased, but I think something like MetaMask Snaps, where it's a permissionless way for you to reach this distribution, is a great way to kind of test the waters, and then you'll see the successful ones rise and the unsuccessful ones or the undeveloped frameworks kind of fall to the ground. Like we, as a domain name service, we've worked with tons of different wallets, Binance, Trust Wallet, and we are one of the top snaps right now, and the top snap in the domain name space. So we were able to prove our product market fit across a lot of wallets. And then through MetaMask snaps, we were able to reach an entirely new distribution channel. So if you can prove the underlying value proposition and then reach users through these, pre-made distribution channels, it's a great way to showcase whether there's actually value in what you're building or whether it's kind of just smoke and mirrors and, just incentives for incentive's sake again.
we don't want to go in the direction that like we will see agents kind of forks and people get kind of ragged because they don't see the track record from those agents, right? But do you see any other, or you wanted to touch before I'm moving?
I forgot my point.
No, like beyond kind of speculation, rebalancing funds or something like that. Like, do you see other kind of like big kind of like DeFi use case that you maybe see that need to be built but not now?
Stuff. So yeah, LP agents, pretty hard to build, but rebalancing stuff is still like a problem that hasn't really been solved. They need some kind of predictive intelligence. Trading on perps protocols, I think, is interesting. So like leverage trading, most people just lose all their money. So it'd be good to like stop that from happening by building like smarter agents. Then risk management agents, I think, are important for lending protocols, so they can alert you when they expect there to be like extreme volatility in the market, and they can add more collateral, so reduce your liquidation point, things like that.
I got a comment because we've been building in public, showing how to build a swarm of agents to do liquidity provisioning, right? So taking in cookie data, streaming data, using our protocol from the graph to track the latest positions, then have a tight inner loop of a deterministic agent that has configurable parameters that adjusts the liquidity positions, and then an LLM-based agent that does a longer cycle of analyzing what's going on in the market to adjust the behavior of those agents, right? So you can see on our X at Theoriq AI, we have live streams and detailed breakdowns of how you build such a swarm of agents, how to make it work, right? So I think it's very much, we're now in alpha on that, like live managing money. So it's autonomously. So like that is really doable, but it's sort of just emerging as a capability. And I think these are some of the first use cases, but I think what's going to be exciting as the industry gets its feet on DeFi agents is, there's a lot of things that are being done, in this very rigid way, like intent networks and solvers that are just a special case of a general problem of dynamically navigating what's the best way for agents to work together. And so we think agents are going to dynamically negotiate and settle transactions that are complicated, that are not restricted the way typical protocols are.
Or even interact with other agents from different kind of like verticals. Yeah. Because the other question is also like MPC wise. I'm, for example, like testing out like, NN8, interacting with different NPCs. They're kind of like Web3 based, but putting these together, for example, social sentiment for rebalancing stuff, kind of they're all kind of like tests, right? But also like the big challenge is here how we can put also like specialized agents together in terms of coordination that is not on a centralized platform. I don't know if we have some questions here from the audience here.
All right, so all you guys are like preaching the world where, AI agents are going to be primary interface between most individuals and DeFi, which I agree with, which makes sense. But doesn't that get us to a point where there are, and as I think some of you already mentioned, that the barriers to entry of creating an agent are getting lower and lower and lower. Doesn't that get us to a point where the value is not in the agent, is choosing the right agent to use?
Yeah, I think that's going to be it. But I think that depends on like your risk tolerance. So
this is why we need social reputation for agents. Like literally, like the second part of the panel is like we need to kind of like figure out first handling the track record, but on base we need to actually build a social reputation and the track record. Yeah, going through a public registry that has open attestation and build social reputation for this agent.
Yeah, and we have this idea in our protocol of evaluators. So you can have independent evaluations based on on-chain data about what was done. But you're always going to have some root of trust, right? Like, what's the root of trust when you decide what to use on the internet? Until recently, it was Google. It's starting to change. For a lot of people, it's now ChatGPT, right? Or Perplexity, right? But there's going to be something that's a starting point of something that has a strong reputation and you trust.
The angle that you're going to, let's assume a degen scenario where there's this magical AI agent where you put your risk profile and it gives you the best yield possible, and there's nothing that can beat this, right? Let's imagine that scenario where somehow you have this magical agent. I believe that in that model, again, not sure if it's possible. Let's assume that for a moment that you have this agent. Then I think you will have scenarios where people will somehow have adversarial behavior to influence that agent in many ways. And you can see that in many settings. Like when you have certain protocols, you always assume that even if the protocol works, you have a certain adversary has certain capabilities. And I would assume that once you have this agent, which is universally the best possible out there for a given, let's say, risk, or reward setting, you would have behaviors where people would launch things that would try to impact that model's behavior, agent's behavior, by influencing the environment in some way.
I think, yeah, like it's all on chain, right? So people have to build trust. Unlike hedge funds, they don't need to take you to fancy dinners. They just need to show that they're earning money on chain and that they're audited, that they're secure, and do that consistently for an amount of time. And then, yeah, they should like rise to the top. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see if there is like a layer where you just say what you want to do, and then it builds a strategy with like multiple agents, and you just put your money in. Or if people are still going to choose specific like verticals they want to go into, like I only want to use stable coins, I only want to use like delta neutral strategies, I only want to do like an arbitrage strategy.
I would say, I think, of course, we have a lot to learn from Web 2 on the AI side of things, and we have to be a little bit more restrained on tokens. I think launching 10,000 tokens doesn't actually help. To be honest. So I think we have to be a little bit more restrained on what you do in terms of agents rather than, hey, here's an agent, and oh, by the way, this also comes with a fancy token. And that somehow slows things down because people who are actually building serious stuff that actually will get used eventually, that get overshadowed, which means that eventually people lose this motivation that, okay, why am I even doing this? So there's this crypto circle of,
Look, I
one
realized,
product, 10,000 tokens.
Yeah, I realized when I started actually to chat with strong kind of like Web2 builder, PhD, Stanford, they're kind of like saying, oh, what you guys are building right now around frameworks is kind of like a joke. Like, this is what I need. This is why I'm building from scratch. And I'm like, okay, let's actually revalue the situation based on their needs. And then I discovered so many kind of angle, kind of like less to learn. So I 100% agree what you're saying here.
I don't agree. I think that it's actually a great thing that we have tokens with agents, and that it creates it's bringing a more democratization. So more quickly you have a way of measuring the value of agents, and you can start to have agents earn capital and create incentives, which need to be coupled with high value agents to do useful things. So an agent with no utility, it doesn't matter if it has a token, it's not very useful, but I don't think it's bad to have tokens. I think that's sort of a superpower in Web3. And Web3 is very much in a race, right? Like what I think agents in DeFi are going to be very successful, but agents in the world are moving incredibly fast. And I think you're going to see the same pattern. The reason that like 95% of the last batch of Y Combinator companies were building agents in Web2 is because it's taking over the world, right? And so that's not going to slow down. We're going to sort of see those capabilities become available in DeFi, but it's not happening in a vacuum. It's all moving very fast.
I mean, we don't need to recreate something like DeFi Summer where people get racked because you get like 200 forks of DEXs. I mean, I agree that token around the ecosystem are actually like engaging and rewarding people, but like having a 10 fork of the first kind of like DeFi agents rebalancing and everybody shipping tokens just for the sake to build communities, I don't think is actually like a worth and value added for even like users that will consume those agents.
I think there's a lot more interesting agents to build than there were DeFi products.
Oh,
there were like a handful of DeFi products and everyone cloned them. Just like how many projects built another blockchain with nobody who needs, right?
Yeah. It was like 2/3 has something like 80% AI generated code or something. It was actually quite crazy, yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I hope it was spicy enough, and a big round of applause.